And welcome to another edition of the Pucks with Haggs podcast. As always, ready to break down plenty of things that are going on in the Stanley Cup playoffs. Even though the Bruins are not involved, there's always things going on with the Bruins, and the playoffs are full swing as we go right now. I'm bringing in a good buddy of mine, somebody I've known a long time, Mark Divver from the New England Hockey Journal. You can find him on Twitter at Mark Divver, MarkDivver. Mark, thanks very much for joining us. What are you up to hockey-wise these days? You watching any club teams, any junior teams? What do you got going on?
Well, just kind of winding down now for the next month or so until, I guess, development camp is coming up. Looking forward to July 4th at Warrior Arena, right? No fireworks or cookouts. It'll be pucks for the 4th of July. So
yeah, forget it. I did find that funny that they scheduled something on the 4th of July, or at least it looks that way, that there's going to be something on the 4th of July for development camp. Maybe that'll be the day they go to, like, you know, all the charity visits and some of the other stuff that they do, and it'll be on off ice. And I wasn't going to ask you about this, but this is actually something I found interesting. That the Blackhawks now are going to go off ice with their complete development camp. And, I can understand the reasons that they're doing it, especially like that time of year, getting the kids off ice when they've been on for a long time. And especially if they haven't skated in a while, and then throwing them on in the middle of July, it's tough to get a proper read on them. But selfishly, as a reporter and somebody watching development camp, it's going to be like the death knell of covering those things if we don't actually have on ice stuff to watch every day to see these guys that we don't watch all year. Just wondering what you think about that whole sort of thing that the Blackhawks are rolling out.
Well, it'll be interesting to see if that catches on because, realistically, I'm not sure how much the hockey part of it helps those kids.
Right.
Some they're all at different stages. Some of them, their season ended 2 months ago. Some of them had ended a couple of weeks ago. And, in years past, I can recall seeing kids there that were just out of shape. You could tell.
Yep.
And, the tendency might be to kind of write those guys off like, oh, that guy, he can't play. But then you realize, okay, he's like 15 pounds overweight. He's not going to be, that's not how he's going to play when camp starts or whatever. So I don't think it would be the disadvantage for us in the media is that junior kids just drafted, kids from Europe that you haven't seen and won't 100%. See in person. It's a look at them, and it gives you a little window maybe into what they are. And the off ice stuff in the room is never hurts to get to know, even just have a 2-minute conversation with a kid and just get a little feel for who he is and what he's about. So it'll be interesting to see if that catches on with the Blackhawks.
I guess I would want to know, though, right, if after a season is over, even with kids that are, 19, 20, 21 years old, I'd want to know that about them. If they don't go to the gym, don't work out, staying off the ice, or just completely, leaving hockey behind and kind of letting it go for a month or two.
Well, the kid, I'm not going to name the kid that was 15 pounds overweight, but he's had like a 7 or an 8 year career in the NHL. It didn't hold him back one bit.
Right.
Whatever he's doing off the ice in that particular spring, I guess he was having fun, but he's had a good career.
and that's why going off of that stuff at development camp is still sometimes a fool's errand, right? When we see a snap judgment for a couple of days. And I guess that's where some of this might be coming from. But I do hope that at least in some form or fashion, they keep an on-ice component to it. So the draft picks, historically the Bruins always do this, and most teams do, right after the NHL draft, and they fly in their picks that they just made. And it's usually a week in July, it's going to be 4th of July week at Warrior Ice Arena, and open to the public, by the way, for people who want to come down this year coming up. And you do get a little bit of a look at them, and it allows the fans to get a look into them too. And I don't want the moment, put it this way, I don't want the moment taken away from me that I had when I first saw David Pastrnak for that first development camp after they drafted him. Within 20 minutes of that first on-ice session, like the skills were jumping off the page. You know, you've been to a million of these too. Usually you see the same sort of players. Nobody really stands out that much. Maybe a couple of guys have great skating strides. I remember Johnny Beecher had that great skating stride that we noticed right away. And maybe a guy's got a great shot. Maybe a guy's got a pretty good handle, like different things that they can do, or a guy's physical if it's a defenseman. But like, you don't see a guy that creatively, offensive instincts, all that stuff that leaps out like Pastrnak did as an 18-year-old kid, especially where he was a late first-round pick. And, you know, the only other player I'd seen that was anywhere close to that in those development camps that I'd covered was Tyler Seguin. And I thought he was even better than Seguin when he first got here, just given the way his skills flashed. So like, I hope that they still have some kind of on ice component. So we still have those moments where we could discover players or see somebody and really see the, you know, the beginnings of greatness, like what we've seen with Pastrnak. You know, but it'll be interesting to see which way they go. Switching gears towards the playoffs, just, wondering, as you watch, we're recording this the day after the Florida Panthers closed out the Carolina Hurricanes. Give the Hurricanes full credit. They battled in that last game. They almost put it to overtime. I thought they were going to win and they were going to extend the series. But once again, Matthew Tkachuk steps up, makes a huge play, scores with, you know, in the final seconds of the third period to stave off overtime to clinch the series. And then he goes and wraps his hand right around the Prince of Wales trophy right afterwards, not caring at all about superstition or anything else, which I love. That's his attitude. It's great. But just curious, your thoughts on the playoffs in general, and if seeing the Florida Panthers go on the run where they've, you know, pretty much dominated the Maple Leafs and the Carolina Hurricanes after getting pushed to 7 games by the Bruins and really being down and out almost in that series when they were down 3-1 before they came back. If that's changed your ideas at all about what happened with the Bruins in the first round, the way things went down, and if they continue to go on this run and end up winning the Cup, if that changes how we view things a little bit about this being this huge choke. Like, on some level, it's still a choke, right? Because they had a lead. They had a lead in Game 7 in the final minute. You know, they had chances to close it out in Game 6. Like, there was, you know, Game 5, Marchand had the breakaway at the end of regulation. Like, they had a bunch of chances and they didn't follow through. So on some level it still is, but I wonder if we temper our feelings about what happened with the Bruins a little bit, given how great the Panthers have played.
I look at the Panthers and it looks to me, you know, having watched, you know, the game for a long time, this is a lightning in a bottle situation to me.
Yeah.
Where they just, everything's going right for them. They're doing everything right. If they get outplayed in a game, they still end up winning. You know, can they continue this into the finals? Whether it's against, it looks like it's going to be against Vegas. You know, that'll be interesting to see. But you know, it's been, and this is no revelation here, but it's reinforced the idea that the regular season is a completely different animal from the playoffs. Everyone knows that, but boy, it's really been driven home this time. You see how hard guys are playing. I didn't see the Bruins playing at that level in the playoffs, or at the end, not at the end of the season, of course, but the hits and the things guys are doing that literally they will do anything to win or to get an advantage. That's like that hit last night on Slavin.
Sam Bennett, who's been a beast throughout these playoffs.
He has kind of out of nowhere, you know. I mean, good player, but not this good. So I mean, just the intensity, the team. Florida's been the team, and Vegas too. They'll just do anything to win to this point. And you know, my takeaway as far as the Bruins is concerned is I didn't see that level of intensity in their series. And I got to think that the way they cruised through the second half of the season obviously contributed to that. They just rolled over teams without having a whole lot of trouble in that second half. And I think that they lost the sharpness in their game and it burned them.
And also, you know, the Bruins have excellent players. There's no question, right? They've got Hall of Famers. They've got all-time greats with the Bruins. That was a wagon of a team in many ways, especially a regular season wagon team. There's no question about it. But, Sam Bennett's a guy that stepped up, no doubt. Bobrovsky is living up, probably for the first time in that contract, probably for the first time in that contract he signed in Florida to be a $10 million man, $10 million a year guy. He's living up to that money, and he's kind of tapped back into what he was for long periods of time with the Columbus Blue Jackets. And, I'm sure, he's a great goaltender, right? And he's looking at this is really his chance at 34 years old to put that sort of crowning achievement on his career with the 2 Vezinas and the other stuff that he's done. And, it's a marked difference from the guy that was sick at the end of the regular season, gave up like 14 or 15 goals in his last 3 starts and lost his job to Alex Lyon, a journeyman, to start the playoffs. You kind of knew, though, that Bob was going to get in at some point and take that over. I was even surprised he didn't start that playoff series against the Panthers, even if he was dreadful to the end of the regular season. So, they had the goalie that was talented enough to go on a run like he's been on, and a heater that he's been on. But I look at Matthew Tkachuk, and like, that's a guy the Bruins do not have, like a big, strong, mean winger that's skilled, like, and those guys are obviously like, unicorns, right? There's not many of them in the league. But, Florida was, as much as it's lightning in a bottle, Florida won the President's Trophy last year. We're talking about a team that's got a lot of talent, and they made a big move in the offseason to get Tkachuk. And he has been the difference maker there as much as anybody else, more than anybody else. I think he would get my Conn Smythe to this point. We'll see what happens in the Stanley Cup final. But like, he's been such a factor in all those series at big moments, subtle plays, intimidation, setting tones physically and just attitude wise, and what you're talking about, doing anything to win. I think he's been that kind of guy. Like, I feel like when you play in a series like that, if you're the Bruins and you go up against a guy like that, it kind of reinforces that the Bruins don't have necessarily that kind of player, even though they've got competitors and they've got really good players, that turns out to be a difference maker in that series.
Well, yeah, you're right. And so why don't the Bruins have that kind of player? Well, to get that kind of player, you have to finish at the bottom or make a trade that puts you inside the top 10.
Yep.
So they've been very successful over the last recent years. They haven't had an opportunity to draft a guy like that. So, I think it's easy to look at that and say, okay, we don't have that kind of guy because we've traded picks, we've done this, we've done that, we've been good. You look at a team like Buffalo, which is on the rise, or New Jersey, which appears to be on the rise.
Yep. They've
got all these terrific young players and all kinds of prospects in the minors, and people look at the Bruins prospects and say, well, geez, Boston doesn't have anyone like these guys. Well, it's obvious why. Boston's been on top of the league, and those 2 teams have been on the bottom forever. So, it's hard to have it both ways, to win and, draft elite players, at the same time. It's almost impossible.
It is. And the only other thing I would say to that is, I think at times the Bruins have not prioritized that kind of player when they have had those picks too, right? Like when,
yes,
not necessarily Tkachuk, because he was high, but like, the Tom Wilson Tkachuk's types, like at points, they've been able to try to go for players that are sort of like that or in that mold, and they do sort of, it seems to me anyway, veer away, or don't put the sort of priority on that kind of player. But most of those, 7 out of 10 of those players don't pan out, 8 out of 10. Even some of them turn into Lawson Krause, who's a pretty good player, but didn't turn into sort of the mean intimidator that, people thought he was going to be, but still an effective player. But like, I guess that's part of it on my end too, when I'm watching the drafts and I'm watching the players that they're taking, is it's felt like at times that wasn't at the top of the list of what they needed or what they thought they needed to go after. Now, I think that kind of changed in this season, and with the guys that they traded for, they definitely were trading for more hard-nosed, physical, not even if they weren't the biggest guys in the world, they were physical guys and they were hard to play against. And, Garnet Hathaway played well. Tyler Bertuzzi's a guy that I think was a great fit with the Bruins. And I would expect that they're going to try to prioritize keeping him, given how he played in the postseason, how good he was as a playoff player, given the chemistry he had with David Pastrnak at times when they were playing together, given how good he was net front in the power play. Like, he brings a lot to the table that could help them. But you're right. There is a formula there for some team. The Chicago Blackhawks turned a dynasty into sucking for a long time, and then getting Jonathan Toews and Patrick Kane, right? To build their team around. And then there's the on the other hand, there's the Vegas Golden Knights, who, were set up to succeed seemingly from their existence with the expansion draft, and have been competitive every single year. And now they're one win away from going to the Stanley Cup Finals as well. Bruce Cassidy returning there since losing with the Bruins in Game 7 in 2019, and really steamrolling the Dallas Stars. That Game 3 was an embarrassment. Jamie Benn, the cross check while the guy's down on the ice, the fans throwing spiked seltzers on the ice, and everything else that was going on in that game. People don't like that I said this, but like, as a traditional hockey fan and somebody that grew up in an original six city, when you see Dallas Stars fan chucking stuff at players and on the ice during a playoff game like that, and you realize it's part of like 4 Sunbelt teams being part of the Final Four here in the NHL, that you're going to see some unconventional and non-traditional stuff from the fans and from the teams, just based on some of these guys have never been there before, very rarely get there. So you're going to see reactions like that.
We do want to tell you quickly about FanDuel, exclusive wagering partner of the CLNS Media Network. I know Bruins are no longer in the hockey playoffs, but obviously there are NHL playoffs going on, as well as NBA playoffs. Right now, new customers, if you sign up at FanDuel, at FanDuel.com/Boston, you get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's $1,000 back in bonus bets if you get it wrong. And you lose, bang, you get a second chance. It's amazing. So sign up, FanDuel.com/Boston. It's in addition to this promotion, there's ridiculous promotions that you can get on a daily basis that are offered on the site. It's super easy app to download, and best thing of all, when you do win, you get paid instantly. If you don't, as I said, FanDuel.com/Boston, no sweat first bet up to $1,000. I do have to tell you have to be 21 or older and present in Massachusetts to participate. A $10 initial deposit is required. Your first online bet must be a real money wager. Refunds are issued as non-withdrawable bonus bets, which expire in 14 days. Restrictions do apply. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Hope is here. Go to gamblinghelplinema.org or call 800-327-5050 for 24/7 support.
Just wondering your thoughts on also Bruce Cassidy, being a 1 win away. You spent a lot of time. You've covered. You're closer to the Providence Bruins, I think, than anybody else in the media. You cover them all the time. You spent a long time with Bruce Cassidy. What was it, 8-9 years with him when he was in Providence, and you got to know him really well while he was down there. Just wondering your thoughts, just watching him 1 win away from getting to the conference finals, and what you think maybe is going through his head as he gets closer and closer to getting back to sort of where it was unfinished business last time.
Well, I'm glad to see him doing well.
Me too.
He's a great good guy. I've seen, complaints from fans, not media people, but fans that, if only the Bruins had kept him around, maybe they'd be a win away from the finals. And my answer to that is no.
Right.
I don't think Krejci would have come back. I doubt that Berge would have come back.
Yep.
Jake DeBrusk wouldn't have rescinded his trade request. I don't think guys like Trent Frederick and Connor Clifton would have got the years
Brandon
they had.
Carlo. Yep.
So it was time. In hindsight, it was time. But the way they built their team, you put a good coach in there, a guy who just is on top of everything, and this is what you get. And one of the big things he's gotten is he's getting the most out of Jack Eichel.
Absolutely.
After all this time, Jack Eichel is living up to the hype that was greeted him at Boston University all those years back. Credit to Butch, and I know, or I think I know that he's there's a little bit of him, gloating to himself that see, I'm 1 win away, and hey, he can do that. He deserves to do that. He can. He's got every right.
I think it is human nature. It would be to deny being human to not feel that way when you were let go by a team, and to his surprise, Don Sweeney comes to your door at your house,
right.
Basically tells you you're gone. That's going to leave a mark. And I think that's going to leave something where you are going to want to have success at your next stop. And, to the best revenge is a life well lived and a career well lived. And I think we're seeing that with him in this team. And you're absolutely right about Eichel. And there's a very real phenomenon, Mark, of players like just sinking down into the morass with the Buffalo Sabres when they're in Buffalo and just getting lost in the muck. And I know it's starting to change a little bit because there's some younger players there that I think are bringing them out of it as a group, right? But there was like a good 10-year stretch where it just looked like everybody that was there got lost in the swamp. And as soon as they got traded out, as soon as they left as a free agent, It looked like a player that was out of jail. It happened with Taylor Hall. It happened with Jack Eichel. It's happened with a ton of guys.
Ryan O'Reilly.
Yes, 100%.
Goes from Buffalo to the Stanley Cup.
Yeah, he goes from driving into a Tim Hortons to winning a Conn Smythe Trophy. It's an amazing turnaround for him. And like he was I thought he was the best player in that Leafs team.
Yeah,
in the postseason, and certainly in that second round series against the Florida Panthers. He's just a money player, and a really good two-way center. But I think there is something. Tage Thompson and Dahlin and those guys are, I think, starting to turn that around and change that perception and change the culture there. But I think Eichel got caught up in that as much as anybody else, and it's a testament to him that he's doing the right things now, and to Butchie for meeting with him over the summertime in Massachusetts and sort of telling him what he needed out of him, and for him, to do the right things. And it was interesting. There's a really good interview Q&A with Bruce Butchie on NHL.com from Dan Rosen. And one of the questions was asking him just how much 2019 still eats at him, right? This was his answer. Oh boy, I personally feel, and I can't account for everybody, but I think I took it as hard as anybody in that organization, if not harder. I know how it affected me because you're that close. Then you go back the next year and you're pushing because you need to be a little bit better to win. Does that affect how you coach? Does that take its toll on the guys in the room because they're the ones that were as close as you is as well? Do they go through some of the same things, or do they just say, well, next year is a new year? I don't look at it that way. I look at it as we need to be a little bit better. Sometimes that can take its toll. Yes, it's still with me, but it's not really with me this year because it's a different group of guys. It's just different, but it's stuck with me in Boston, and you need to find a way to park that. Most of the time you do, but when you're that close, it's not that easy.
Yeah.
And I think that really sort of encapsulates, like when you're at a place so long, especially if you get that close to winning a cup and you are different sort of competitively from others, or you view it in a different way, how you can start to have like sort of a break between some of the players, the coach, especially if he's like obsessed with now winning that cup because he came so close, and the players sort of view it as in a different sort of light, some of them anyway. And I thought that like perfectly encapsulated like maybe where the road started to diverge for him after 2019, and it took a few years for it to finally break off, but that's where like the two paths started going off.
Yeah, and how many NHL coaches would give a thoughtful, articulate answer like that to a question, right? A lot of guys would blow it off in a couple of sentences, move on to the next. But, that's one of the things we love about Butch is that he gives answers like that. He's a deep thinker in that sense, in terms of answering questions like that.
No doubt. And I think Jim Montgomery, as he got more comfortable, loosened up a little bit as far as I don't think he's ever going to be as full as answering questions as Bruce Cassidy is. Cassidy's to the point where you almost, it was kind of like Tim Army when he was at Providence. After a little while, he'd give you so much, you'd be like, all right, I got what I need. Thank you. Let's move on to the next one, which was awesome. Like, it's a great problem to have. But I think Bruce was kind of like that to a degree. He would almost answer the question, your follow-up question, before you could even ask it, because he anticipated what was coming. Interested to get your perspective on Montgomery and sort of the criticism that he got in the first round after, seemingly pushing all the right buttons and pulling all the right levers during the regular season with the Bruins. And, in my opinion, I think he got caught up in things a little bit in that first round. And I think at times the moment got a little big for him. And I certainly think he learned some lessons or some teaching moments that he's going to take moving forward from that experience. But I think there was a lot of easy second guesses and things you look at and kind of scratch your head, like, why did that happen? That make you wonder how things are going to go in a second year with him, with the team. Well,
yeah. And I think a question or something to watch going forward is, a trauma like this. And this is what it is, a trauma to blow that lead in the first round after the regular season they had. But how does this affect Monty and the players going forward? Does this something like this can linger and probably will linger? And how does it affect them going into next season and beyond? It's going to be interesting to watch. I don't think you just laugh this off for sure and say, okay, that happened, but now we're on to whatever, Buffalo or Toronto or wherever their season opener is. This was a tough one. No question about it. That's not news. But I think Monty hopefully will be better for it. That he'll grow. You're right. He pushed every button in the regular season, worked out, and in the playoffs, was it the third game where he made a bunch of lineup changes, and it worked. It worked perfectly. They won the game. They were in the driver's seat, and after that, they didn't win another game. He made other changes, or didn't make changes in terms of the goalie, and it blew up in his face. So
game 5 was the one I look at as the sort of pivotal moment, where that was when Bergeron came back. That's when he started the game with lines that had never played together during the year, separated Marchand and Bergeron.
Yeah.
That was the perfect moment to put Swayman in, I think, when they had a goalie rotation that was successful during the year. You're up 3-1. You can coach like you're up 3-1. You can put Swayman in and say, hey, if it doesn't work out, we still get 2 cracks at it. But I feel like at that point, he almost started coaching like they were losing the series and they were desperate, rather than they were up 3-1 and they were kind of in the driver's seat and had control of the series. And I thought that was just sort of an interesting approach and mindset from him, at that point in the series.
Yeah, I think as that game was unraveling, game 6, I'm thinking of.
Yep.
I think you saw him explode on the bench at one point when it was too late then. Yep. It was too late. He should have exploded earlier or in the room or,
Yep.
And he didn't. And, that's a second guess along with some of the lineup decisions that you just shake your head and wonder, why he didn't do it differently.
Yeah, I absolutely, and I've said this a couple times on the podcast, I hated what he had to say after game 6. Thoroughly hated it. When he started talking about what a great hockey game it was. It sounded like a college hockey coach. It really did.
You're right.
Being super positive and like, oh, great hockey game. We're lucky to have this opportunity. Like, no, that is not what you want to hear after they've blown a couple chances to win. And now they're, at a game, going into a game 7 against the Florida Panthers, who have all the momentum at that point. You're right. At that point, like, it was too late to blow up, and it was also too late to try to be like, everything is awesome, like it's every sunshine and roses here. What a great hockey series we're in. It was just not the right tone.
No, after that game was the time for him to, be pissed off, throw a couple of no comments. I'm not answering that question. Next question. Be pissed off. Be pissed off.
Show some attitude.
Yeah, show some attitude. Exactly right.
Absolutely. Well, that's good to hear. And that sounds actually like my 9-year-old son, Finn, in the driveway, who is constantly ripping pucks and there's black marks all over the net now from like him just abusing the net that's in the driveway. And you can constantly hear the noise out there. All the neighbors hear it whenever he's around. So like, he keeps busy with that. He keeps busy with all the other sports he's doing. And that's why I'm glad that one of our sponsors for the show is Factor Meals, America's #1 ready-to-eat meal kit. This is something where you can get keto, you can get smart meals with around or less than 550 calories per serving. It takes just 2 minutes to make them. You heat them up and enjoy. It's not like these ones where you get the food delivery and they come and you get all the ingredients, you have to cook it. And it takes like 25, 30 minutes. So if you're like me and you coach your son in a bunch of sports and you're running around everywhere, you get something you can throw in the oven for 2 minutes and then it's ready to go, or the micro. It's perfect. Factor Meals. Head to factormeals.com/Haggs50 and use code Haggs50 to get 50% off. That's a huge savings on your first box. That's code Haggs50 at factormeals.com/Haggs50 to get 50% on your first box. So thank you very much to them. And, getting back to your point before, I think this is interesting. Obviously a different team, 2010 blew a 3-0 lead against the Philadelphia Flyers in historic fashion.
Yep.
And that team, that was a trauma, no doubt about it. I still remember being in that locker room after that series was over, and Mark Recchi just didn't move for about a half an hour, had towels over his head, and was just completely like stunned and bewildered. And that's a Hall of Fame player. Like, you don't see things like that very often when you're covering the NHL. And to a man, they were all like that. But that was a group that was younger, all more guys around the same age group, had gone and went through that and learned from it and grew from that trauma and became determined to not ever have that happen again, and won the cup the next year. And that was a big driving force for them winning after that. You have to wonder how guys like Charlie McAvoy, David Pastrnak, the goalies, Linus Ullmark, Jeremy Swayman, Taylor Hall, Brad Marchand, like the players that are going to be there next year. You have to wonder, especially the guys that haven't won a cup before, of which there may only be one guy left with Marchand, how they're going to react to that kind of trauma this time around, as opposed to that group that went through the 2010 trauma before they won the cup.
Yeah. And the lineup going into next year is going to be those guys you mentioned will be back mostly, in theory.
Yep. Lindholm's another one I should mention. He's obviously going to be a core guy who has a lot to answer for after that playoff series.
Yeah. Well, but guys who won't be back, I'm going on the idea that Bergeron and Krejci will not be back.
Me too.
So you take those two guys out and the rest of them can, be off the charts again. And are you, where are you going without those two centers? And it's only May here. We don't know what the plan is. We don't know who's going to replace those guys. So, that's sort of a wait and see. But I think this one leaves a mark for a while. And we'll, if they can rebound like the 2010 team did, then that'll be something. But I'm not holding my breath on that one.
No, because I think it's a different makeup.
They're in a different place. Yep.
Different levels for the players. And like you said, I if they won the cup, even if they got to the cup final, I think Bergeron was no question out.
Yeah.
It was right off into the sunset. He had a good run. But I do, and I think Krejci, I just really doubted he was going to come back again after this year, regardless. He was playing here. His family was living in South Carolina. His kids were there the whole year. His wife was there the whole year. They were going to school down there. So he basically didn't have his family around him all year, except for a few different occasions. That's why they had to push back the celebration of his 1,000th game because they weren't there when he played in his 1,000th game, and they came up like during school vacation week, and they did it at that point. And it was, I think, a really hard year for him. And a great year in some ways because he was around the boys all the time, and sort of like, look, there are times when you're married and you have kids where it's fun to like be on the road for a little bit, whatever.
Right.
And you're playing hockey every day. And I think that part of it was probably fun for him, but like, it's really difficult when you're married and you have kids to be away from them for long stretches like that. And I think it would be really hard for him to do that again. But I think, the way it ended for both of them, like they're going to have to think long and hard about, is that how my career is going to end? Is that how my NHL career is going to come to a close, especially for Bergeron?
Yeah.
Like, if I'm him, how do I say, okay, I'm done, when that's the lasting moment that's a snapshot at the very end of your career, is a moment like that, where you're on the ice in the third period and in overtime, when those goals get scored in game 7, clearly you're compromised and you're playing at a percentage of your abilities because you've got a herniated disc in your back. And that this team, this historic regular season team, sort of flames out in the first round. That's a hard one for that. That might be enough motivation for a proud guy like him to come back for one more.
Yeah, you're right. I'd be surprised, but stranger things have happened. And you're right. He, to go out on that note just doesn't seem right.
No,
doesn't seem right.
It doesn't fit with the rest of the storybook, Mark.
No, it doesn't. No.
That's a awful final chapter to that fairy tale. that fairy tale hockey story. One other thing in the Bruins news, Don Sweeney named finalist for GM of the year, along with Florida's Bill Zito and Dallas Stars GM Jim Nill. I think he has won the award before. I think this might be the season where he's the most deserving of the award, just given the team he put together, given the salary cap gymnastics they were able to do to keep everything together and to really build that team. That move to get Dmitry Orlov and Garnet Hathaway at the trade deadline, or before the trade deadline with the Washington Capitals, kind of came out of nowhere a little bit and was a brilliant move and really addressed exactly what they needed. And then they got insurance on top of that with Tyler Bertuzzi when Holland and Foligno were hurt. And obviously, they're not picking in the first or second round for a while, and they've paid heavily to go all in for that year. But I found it very interesting during the season-ending press conference when Cam Neely said that a number of players apologized for not winning with the wagon of the team that they had provided for them. So, I think that's just a testament to the job that Don Sweeney and his group, Evan Gold and everybody else that's in that management group did to build the best team that they could. And on paper, they should have rolled and won everything this postseason.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And, Don takes a lot of heat, has taken heat over the years, and at times deserved, but,
especially early, right? Like
especially
early in
early,
his tenure.
the 2015 draft still keeps coming up. For God's sake, it was 8 years ago,
Yeah.
But
I think that was a fair second guess, like in 2019 especially, right? Because if you would add an impact player in that first round with one of those two other picks, maybe that pushes you over the top to win the cup there, especially with a loaded draft like there was in 2015. But I think, the statute of limitations kind of run out on that one, right? Like it's 8 years ago. And I think as he's gone along and as he's gained the experience, like he's turned into one of the best GMs in the NHL, and a lot of the criticism that was there early on doesn't apply anymore.
No question. And the award is for this year. It's not the body of work starting when he came in. It's this year. And I don't think you cannot second guess. I don't think you cannot second guess his work with this year's team.
What do you think the best move was that he made this year from sort of beginning to end? If you could like pick out one that you thought was a really that's just a brilliant move.
Well, I think the one you mentioned, Hathaway and Orlov, and then followed by Bertuzzi. I mean, that was going into the trade deadline, I don't think anyone could have come up with a scenario where they got those guys and said, yeah, these are the guys you got to get, and it's kind of typical of trade deadlines. People talk about this guy and that guy, and what about this? And they were seen scouting this guy, and it inevitably almost it turns out to be guys you never thought of that were never mentioned. And he hit it out of the park with those deals right at the end there. I mean, who saw that coming?
No, it was it was just surprising that the Capitals kind of punted on the season and started trading away assets and decided they just weren't in it because they were traditionally, I don't think people seriously thought Orlov or Hathaway were getting dealt until it kind of started happening. It was interesting. I think he's become one of the best GMs in the league. Given the way they work the salary cap, and obviously, there's going to be a $4.5 million, and this is another reason why I don't think Krejci and Bergeron are coming back, because there's going to be a $4.5 million bonus overage penalty, on this coming year's cap that they're going to have to pay. And like I said, they're not going to have like high draft picks unless they trade for a couple for the next few years. But that was all based on like the total understanding that this was probably going to be Bergeron and Krejci's last run, and that they were just going to put all the chips in to try to win it this year. And you got to give somebody credit for just having that as the mindset and the goal at the end of it.
Yeah, you do. And there have been times in the past where, the fan base has complained that they didn't go all in at the trade deadline, that they didn't do enough, and that, they didn't take advantage of whatever assets they had to make their team better. And this year, you can't say that. They did. They went for it, and it didn't work out, but I give them credit for going for it.
Absolutely. And when it comes to Garnet Hathaway, he's probably going to be too high priced to come back, given his role and what he does. He's a third, fourth line guy, physical player, throws hits, does a lot of. It's kind of the prototypical Bruins player in the hard nosed way that he plays in a lot of ways. I'm going to miss the guy that I could talk about Becky's Diner in Portland, Maine with, because he, knew the slogan of the place, ate there all the time, just like I do. Like when I'm there in the summertime, him talking about going to the AHL games at the Cumberland County Civic Center. There was Portland Pirates, I think, at that point when he was growing up. I'm going to miss that, but that kind of makes me think of the Providence Bruins, which is, part of the reason we wanted to have you on here too. Was to just with the salary cap issues that the Bruins are going through right now, there's going to be some young players on that roster. There's going to be trades, and I think there's going to be guys coming up from Providence. They're going to have to play roles next season. So I just kind of wanted to get your take on a team in Providence that went out in the first round, similar to the Bruins did. Obviously didn't have the record-breaking regular season that they did, but had some solid players. And just your take on some of the players, I guess, starting with a guy who we may end up seeing in Boston, depending on how things shake out with the goaltending. I kind of believe that, there's going to be, the Bruins are going to have to explore trading one of them. And I think it's going to probably be Linus Ullmark, especially coming off a Vezina trophy, likely Vezina trophy. And, if you can get a Vezina trophy winner for $5 million a year, that's good value. So it would be a smart move to deal him. But Brandon Bussey would likely be the backup if one of those guys gets traded. Just what you saw out of him in Providence this year.
Well, I think Brandon Bussey's the reason they finished in first place. I would say he stole probably 5-6 games over the course of the year. They finished first by 1 point with a win on the last day of the regular season. If you take out those 5 to 6 games where he stole, in my estimation, they're not a first place team. And he, the way he approaches it and the way he battles, just never quits on a shot or a puck is really something to see. And I think he was a surprise this year that he was that good. He had a great college career, no doubt, but you never know if that translates to the pro game. Now, will they might be forced, as you say, they might be forced to put him in, as the backup next year.
Yeah.
Is he ready for that? I think he'd be better served by, say, half a season in Providence again to work on some things. He's a guy that gives up a lot of rebounds. And we know that in the NHL, that's not going to fly.
No.
But could he play 20, 25 games in the NHL, maybe next year? Yeah, he might be able to do that. And it's not a bad option to have a young up-and-coming prospect, as opposed to, picking a guy off the scrap heap that's, been a journeyman type of goalie as your backup. Bussy might be up for the job. And he's a great kid. He's good with the media. I think he understands that, talking about the game is an important part of it too. When you're the goalie, talking about what went right, what went wrong. I think he's similar to Swayman in that regard. Sway from day one knew that, okay, I got to answer some questions, and I can't just be, no, next question, no comment, stuff like that. And I think Bussy's similar to that. So, but I mean, he had a great year.
And Swayman was a guy that sort of, when he came up in his first full year, had some rebound things and some other things to work on for sure too. That, he went down to Providence for a stint and worked on those. And, I certainly, I think if they end up making a move and they bring up a guy like Bussy to potentially be the backup, there would absolutely have to be like a Keith Kincaid type in there. Somebody like that, you would have in Providence that has experience, that if you did need to switch them out for a little bit, if that player needed to work on things, you could, or if you want to go with that player to start the year as the backup, while Bussy works on rebound control or technique or whatever else down there, he definitely could. But like, it's, you always got to start dealing from surplus when you're in salary cap jail. And,
right.
The two areas they have surplus are defense and goaltending. So I would fully expect that they're going to explore that. Georgi Merkulov, leading scorer in Providence last year, 24 goals, 55 points in 67 games as a 21-year-old kid. And, a player that this is the kind of player the Bruins are going to have to make their hay on the next few years, these college free agent types, because they're not going to have high draft picks. So they're going to have to crush it with these kind of players, just what you saw out of him.
Well, he had a great year as well, like Bussy. He's not a guy who was, tearing up the ice with tremendous speed, entering the zone, with great speed. He's more of a slow it down, gain entry to the zone, and then slow it down, take a look, and make a play from there.
Kind of Krejci style in that regard.
Yeah. Yes. Not, I hesitate to compare him to a guy like Krejci because that's a big burden, but
obviously,
but yeah, the slow it down part, definitely. That's him, skilled, can really shoot it, shot it a lot more in the second half of the year. And he's got a big time one-timer on the power play. But yeah, I can see him. He's another one that I think would be well served by some time in Providence to start the year, maybe. Just to button down the last few details that need to be taken care of. He came a long way in his defensive play over the course of the year. I know, and that was a point of emphasis with the coaching staff, that this is what you have to do if you're going to get up and play in the NHL. The other thing about the kid that's encouraging is he lives to play hockey. It's. I don't think there was an optional skate all season long where he didn't show up, and would always be out there late working on things. The kid is just all he wants to be is an NHL player, and I think he'll get there. Whether it'll be this year in a full-time role, it might. They might have no choice. depending on what else they do. But I think he's I'm very high on him as a prospect.
Yeah, those kind of guys, the first to the rink, last to leave, always there guys, especially if they have skill. That they find a way. Those guys do to get there. What was his best position?
Well, he played mostly center.
He did.
And they used him on the wing at times. That's a thing with Ryan Mougenel, and I think organizationally, Johnny Beecher spent time on the wing too. You have to learn. They emphasize this. You have to learn to play on the wall if you're going to succeed in the NHL.
Yep.
The stat came out a couple of weeks ago that 80% of the time in the NHL the puck is within 3 feet of the boards.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can't play in that, along those the walls, you're probably not going to be very successful. I don't see him as a wing in the NHL. I just don't. He's not a physical guy. He's not going to run people over. I still see him as a center. His playmaking and all of that, I think, is more effective in the middle than coming at it from the walls.
And to your point, if he's going to play center in the NHL, his details better be good, and he's going to have to, away from the puck, be as good as he is with the puck. I know this player is the one everybody sort of asks about down in Providence, Fabian Lysell. I remember you were a little critical of him going to the World Juniors with Team Sweden. And, after the experience, he probably wished he hadn't have gone. I think he was, obviously the numbers weren't eye-popping at the AHL level, but we're also talking about a 19-year-old kid that's playing in a man's league where it can be very difficult for kids that young. So just what you thought of him in general and his development path.
Well, I think I looked the numbers up. He scored 8 goals in 20 games before he went to the World Juniors and 6 in 37 games once he came back. So there's the story. Honestly, I expected more. I expected better numbers. I expected a bigger impact. Now he had, I think, 37 points. That's not a bad year for a 19-year-old in the American League. But when you look at the way he skates and the dynamic flashes that you see, I hoped for better than the numbers he had. And there were stretches where you just didn't notice him. Stretches of weekends, and then he would come back with a terrific game. So is that a function of the fact that he's 19? That his season last year started in July with World Juniors camp in Sweden,
right,
and continued all the way through. There's a lot. There's probably a lot of that in there, but at the same time, I would have liked to see him do better this year. At the end of the year in the playoffs, he got lit up on a very dirty hit. But he was trying at that point to cut into the middle of the ice into traffic.
He
did that, and I think in the first game of the season, and he got blown up.
Yep.
And he got away from that as the season went on, and because you just can't do that. But there he was again in the playoffs trying that move, and he paid the price. So that's maybe that's a minor thing. It's one particular incident, but. I'm going to say that if the right deal came along for the Bruins and somebody said, yeah, we want to have Lysell in that trade, I would do it.
If he's like the centerpiece of the deal, or he's like the grade A prospect that gets something done.
If you're going to get something back that really is going to be impactful, I would trade him. I would. Now I know the fan base, might be coming after me with pitchforks and torches, but I would do that. It's not because I don't think he's a pretty good prospect. I think he is, but I think I don't know. I think he's a ways away yet.
What was it? Do you think it was the physicality in some instances that caused him to sort of like fade into the background? Was it just?
It's probably some of that. He's got to get man strength. That's what and I hope the concussion didn't set him back in like his training when the season ended. September will be here before we know it. Is there enough time from, June, July, August? Is there enough time to get that strength that he needs? If he's laid up with a concussion for a few weeks, then that sets him back, I think. So it'll be interesting to see what he looks like at the beginning of this season. I know fans want to shoehorn him into the lineup. And what I would say is be patient, because he's not there yet. Yeah,
and it would be certainly a big mistake if a guy needs that much development at the HL level still, if you're going to push him up to the NHL. A couple guys here that have had some NHL time, Oscar Steen and Mark McLaughlin.
Well, Oscar Steen, I think he's crossed the threshold from prospect to depth player at this point. I believe he's on a one-way contract. So I'd expect to see him in Boston to start the season. Now, what are you going to get out of him? I think he's a bottom six guy. I don't think he's going to put up, great numbers, but certainly a serviceable player at this point, a depth player that can help. He plays an agitating, in your face kind of style. But I don't think he's going to put up any numbers, but he can be a useful player. So I think you'll see him in Boston. I could see Mark McLaughlin as the fourth line center at the start of the year. I don't expect Nosek to be back. Right. I could be wrong, but
no, I think you're right about that one with Nosek for sure. Like, he was a good player, but like Don Sweeney's MO is to switch those guys out when their contracts are up. You don't keep the bottom six, especially the fourth line guys.
And you're developing prospects in Providence so that they can come in and fill a role with a low cap hit. And,
right.
I think Mark is capable of being a fourth line center in the NHL, at the beginning of next year. I think that's a role he'll grow into. He'll get better as he goes. Those of us who watched him in college and a little bit, at the end of the year, in the previous year in Boston and in Providence this year, you can see what he can do, what he brings. He's always, he's another guy who never comes off the ice in Providence on practice days, but. He is what he is. He's not going to put up, great numbers, but I think he can be a serviceable fourth line player as soon as October of this year.
I agree. He played well enough in training camp last year to be a fourth line player on that Bruins team, the NHL club, right out of camp. And he's a solid year in Providence. I think he's definitely ready at this point. And I'm happy that you said it and I said it, because our listenership in Billerica just went up about 1,000% after giving McLaughlin the thumbs up for the NHL roster next year. I'll just love to see Billerica people at the Garden, cheering him on. Maybe they can get those giant heads like what was the kid from New Hampshire that played in the fourth line a few years ago, and they used to bring the giant pictures.
Tim Schaller.
Thank you. They should do that with Mark McLaughlin. Bring some giant McLaughlin heads.
Yes.
Up into the Garden rafters, the balcony. Johnny Beecher, you mentioned him a little bit ago. I love the way he skates. I love the size. I love his attitude. He may end up, I think, being a bottom six guy as well at some point. Like, not exactly what you want out of a first round pick, but what did you think of his year in Providence?
I thought he started slow and finished strong. If you would ask me in, say, December what I thought, I wouldn't have been very complimentary. But I thought he got noticeably better in the second half of the season. Now, he is what he is. The guy with great wheels, a big body. And I think we saw him using that body more in the second half of the season, engaging more. I remember talking with Jamie Langenbrunner last fall at the Prospects Challenge in Buffalo, And he was stressing that Beecher has to be engaged. He has to be engaged in the game, or else he's not that effective.
Yep.
He was pretty well engaged in the second half of the year. He needs to ramp that up even more. He even had a couple of fights in the second half. And that's not going to be he's not going to be that guy. But if you're going to play a bottom six role in the NHL, especially if you're trying to fight for a job, you have to be willing to fight from time to time. You don't have to knock anybody out, but you need to be willing to do it. So that was an encouraging sign. There are times when he needs to use his speed, have confidence in his speed. There are times when you see him and you think, wow, he's going to beat this guy wide, and he pulls up. He needs to me, put the pedal to the metal and take it to the net, beat the guy. More of that is what I would like to see. And watching New Jersey, I mentioned this, I think, on Twitter. I saw a guy in Mikey McLeod he was a first round pick.
Yeah.
Okay. He's their fourth line center. He's very effective in that role on a good team. That's a good team at this point. If Johnny Beecher could, mold his game into a Mikey McLeod type of fourth line, third line presence, I think the Bruins should be happy with that, because I don't think Beecher's a guy who's going to put up numbers. How many times have we seen him at Michigan in on a breakaway and he doesn't finish? He's just not that guy.
Yep.
But doesn't mean he can't, be an effective player in a role in the bottom six. Now, I think he needs more time in Providence next year. But they may have to, depending on what else they do, they may need to just plug him in and kind of throw him into the deep end and see if he can swim at this point. So.
Similar to Daniel Paille in being a first-round pick, and wheels and the hard-nosed way that he plays constantly put him in great scoring situations.
Right.
Breakaways, other things, but just the hands were not there to be able to finish off those plays. And a big part of it is exactly what you're talking about, where you got to know who you are as a player at that point. And you're a straight line kind of guy that just needs to go as fast as you can in straight lines, rather than thinking you're a Krejci, Georgi Mokulov type that's going to like wheel around and pull it up and circle and drag somebody. That's just not who he is.
Right.
This is an interesting guy, right? Jacob Lauko had some flashes definitely at the NHL level. I know there were maybe times where it seemed like, you heard whispers that he wasn't happy about being bounced back and forth between Boston and Providence. And it seemed odd at times, some of the stuff that you would hear about him. But to the point of that, like, he played pretty well whenever he was up with the Bruins. And certainly he shows the tenacity and some of the offensive upside to be able to be a fourth, even maybe a third line player. Just what you thought of him in general.
Well, I look at him now and I think he's an NHL player now at this point. I don't think if he finds himself demoted to Providence, at the beginning of next year or at any time next year, I don't know. I think that's on him. He's shown he can do it. He's just got to be more consistent. And the part about him not liking being on the shuttle, my quick retort to that is play better.
Right.
Play better.
Right.
Make it so that they can't send you down, or they don't want to send you down, or they send somebody else down.
Yep.
Excuse me. Consistency is what he needs in his game. And, he hasn't been consistent since day one in Providence. He has not been consistent. He'd string together really good stretches and then disappear. You wouldn't notice him. I think that happened that's one of the reasons he was on the shuttle in Boston, is he'd follow up a good game or two with a game where you didn't notice him, where you didn't see him get in on the forecheck, where he wasn't skating around like his hair is on fire, as they say. If he's not doing that, then what's he doing? So he's got to be that guy all the time. So I think it's up to him at this point, how whether he grabs a job full time or not. It's on him.
Yeah, and to his credit, he's put himself in that place, just given the flashes that he's shown at the NHL level and the price being right, salary cap wise. I mean, it's part of the reason he was with the team to start last year at the beginning of the NHL season, and certainly I think it's why he's going to factor in where they're going to need bargain basement players on that bottom six. There's no doubt about it. Couple of guys. One came later on in the year, and one, obviously isn't going to draw a lot of fanfare, but he's a local guy, Mike Callahan and Shane Bauer.
I think Mike Callahan was fine as a first-year pro, but he's a ways away. And he'll be a bottom pairing guy, I would say. I think that's how they see him, and it's certainly how I see him. He made good progress as a first-year pro. Got plenty of ice time. So I think he had a positive season. Shane Bowers, I don't think we'll, if we see him in a Boston uniform, I'll be surprised. I don't think, here's another guy, first round pick. I believe, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was. No, he was a first round pick.
No offensive game, none. He can skate, but brings nothing to the table that I could see in terms of offense. He's a depth player. I don't think he'll be an NHL player at this point. And
that's interesting.
The fact that they were
surprising though. I mean, that's why another organization moves on from a first rounder,
Right. So he's on his third organization now.
Yeah.
There's going to be a fourth and a fifth, I think, at some point.
I hope he gets a few cups of coffee. God bless that kid. I hope he keeps working hard. And finally, obviously he came at the end of the year. You got a couple glimpses at him. Mason Lohrei, who I would expect, given their defenseman situation, either sooner or later is going to be in Boston at some point next year, just because they need, they're going to need one of those defensemen just based on the moves I think they're going to have to make. But just what you saw him in the brief time in Providence.
Well, he certainly passes the eye test as far as his size, his skating, his willingness and eagerness to jump into the play and be a part of the offense. But I think, I could see him in Boston filling in for a few games next year, but I think he needs a year in the American League. Coaches talk all the time now about playing fast. Mason needs to learn to play fast, or at least at the speed level that the pro game is at.
Yeah.
It was he had good stretches in Providence, but there were other stretches where he struggled with the pace of the game and just, the heaviness of the forecheck and the speed at which everything happens. But I think he's going to play a long time in the NHL for Boston. Hopefully, certainly as a top four defenseman, once he gets his feet under him. I think he's certainly capable of that, but he's got a ways to go. The good news is, again, he's another kid who can't get enough hockey. Always, sometimes there were couple times where he was a healthy scratch in Providence for one reason or another. And sometimes you see those guys spend 10 minutes on the ice for the optional skate and then they're out of there, right?
Yeah.
Not this guy. He stays out there the whole time, and he's out there afterwards skating and working on this and that, puck handling. He's another guy that's going to do what it takes to get there and be good. And the attention he's getting from the coaching staff, I think will help him get there. There were a couple times near the end where he would be in the in the coach's office, after a long practice, and they would go over every one of, and this made me wonder, like, how many times in a game does a defenseman touch the puck?
Yeah.
A lot.
Yep.
A lot.
Yep.
Well, they would be in there going over every one of his puck touches from the previous game, every single one.
Wow.
And, okay, what'd you see here? What were you thinking here? Why did you do this? So it's that level of coaching that he's going to get down in Providence that's going to help him get to where he needs to be. So I think a lot of him as a player. I think he's going to be a good one for Boston. I don't think he's going to be, Victor Hedman, but I think he's going to be a top 4D, certainly with a potential to play in the league for quite a while.
Well, that's good news all around, not only from Mason Lowry, who obviously has the skills, the size, the skating, the offensive ability, all the tools are in play. That's great to hear that is along with it, his attitude. But, you also need the coaching staff in Providence to have the due diligence to do that kind of stuff to help develop the players. And, when they're working hand in hand like that, and I know Adam McQuaid had a big hand in everything that he'd done as well from a player development perspective. And he took a lot of interest in him when he was at Ohio State. So that part, I think, of the Bruins organization, the player development, bringing the players through the system is proved to be excellent. Just based on when you see the players that come up. Anybody that I didn't mention that you think was notable or maybe in play next year?
Well, Luke Toporowski, I don't think he'll be in play next year, but he's a prospect to keep an eye on. He was having a great season when he went out with a knee injury in, I think, late January. So he was out for a couple of months with that. But when he recovered and came back, he pretty much picked up where he left off as far as scoring. Now, he's an undersized kid, undrafted. He's not 6 feet tall, I don't think. He's not going in banging bodies, although he's not shy about getting in on the forecheck. But he can really rip the puck, and he's a gifted scorer, a gifted finisher. So I think now they got to get his name on an NHL contract. He played this year on an American League contract. I expect they will sign him. I have every expectation that they will. But he'll have multiple offers from other teams to sign him, because I think he's potentially a guy who will play in the NHL. And he's, like I said, a scoring winger who can really fire the puck. And I'm amazed that he went undrafted. I see guys who are drafted, in the later rounds that are just, you wonder, like, what were they? And I'm not talking about the Bruins. I'm talking about across the league. What the hell were they thinking when they drafted this guy? And a guy like Toporowski goes undrafted. It's, I don't. That's kind of baffling. But I like Toporowski a lot, and I'm hoping for news that he's signed, before too long. I think after July 1, I think his contract will be up, and I think he can go wherever he wants at that point. But I don't think it'll come to that. I think they'll get him signed.
Yeah, it feels like the later rounds of the draft oftentimes become like doing favors for, you know.
Oh yeah.
People, your second cousin, your other GM buddy's, son or nephew or whatever. Like, it seems like there's a lot of that in the last couple of rounds, and these other kids that are deserving, end up being non-drafted. But like in some ways, it's good for them, because then they can choose where they go, or they play. They have a little bit more, if they can get noticed and flash in a development camp, they can sort of decide their route and pick a team where they might have the best chance of making it, rather than be stuck with the team that drafted them.
Well, and Toporowski, I think of when he was injured. I talked about guys who really will do anything to make it. He's another one. When he was rehabbing his knee, at the same time, Vinny Lettieri was rehabbing the injury he had in Boston there, which was a shame for him.
Oh yeah. Yep.
they weren't cleared to skate yet, but those two guys were going to some place in Cumberland, Rhode Island. Somebody's got like a shooting pad or whatever you want to call it set up there, and they were going there like in the afternoon and just ripping pucks all afternoon. You know, I mean, you see these guys on the ice shooting and shooting and shooting. It's obvious how come they're so good at it.
Yeah.
You know, these guys must have been taking, I don't know, 300 shots a day, you know, working on their slappers and wristers. And so Topper is one of those guys who I think is going to do whatever it takes. So that's a positive.
You can't bet on the Bruins anymore, obviously, on FanDuel. That's unfortunate, but there's a lot of other teams you can go out there and throw some money on and have a good time and be a big winner. One of the biggest winners I know, Mark Divver, thank you very much from New England Hockey Journal for showing up today and talking some hockey with us.
Happy to do it, Joe. Look forward to seeing you on the 4th of July at Warrior.
Absolutely. I will be there, and I hope to see a lot of you fans out there the 4th of July at Warrior, too, for Bruins development camp. That's it for Pucks with Haggs this week. We'll see you at the rink.